Welcome again. Now we start this hour with this story. U.S. President Joe Biden has defended his handling of the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan, including the frantic final evacuation from Kabul airport. Mr. Biden said it was the best available option to end both the United States' longest war and decades of efforts to remake other countries through military force. His comments come just after the Taliban took total control of Kabul airport after the U.S. exit. More than 123,000 people were evacuated in a massive but chaotic airlift by the United States and its allies over the past 2 weeks. But many of those who helped Western nations during the war were left behind.
I made a decision to end this war. As part of that decision, we set the date of August 31st for American troops to withdraw. The assumption was that more than 300,000 Afghan national security forces that we had trained over the past 2 decades and equipped would be a strong adversary in their civil wars with the Taliban. That assumption that the Afghan government would be able to hold on for a period of time beyond military drawdown turned out not to be accurate. The bottom line, 90% of Americans in Afghanistan who wanted to leave were able to leave. And for those remaining Americans, there is no deadline. We remain committed to get them out if they want to come out. The Taliban has made public commitments, broadcast on television and radio across Afghanistan, on safe passage for anyone wanting to leave, including those who worked alongside Americans. We don't take them by their word alone, but by their actions. And we have leverage to make sure those commitments are met. Let me be clear. Leaving August the 31st is not due to an arbitrary deadline. It was designed to save American lives. That was the choice, the real choice, between leaving or escalating. I was not going to extend this forever war, and I was not extending a forever exit. The decision to end the military airlift operations at Kabul airport was based on the unanimous recommendation of my civilian and military advisors. We've got to learn from our mistakes. To me, there are 2 that are paramount. First, we must set missions with clear, achievable goals, not ones we'll never reach. And second, we must stay clearly focused on the fundamental national security interest of the United States of America. This decision about Afghanistan is not just about Afghanistan. It's about ending an era of major military operations to remake other countries. We saw a mission of counterterrorism in Afghanistan, getting the terrorists and stopping attacks, morph into a counterinsurgency, nation building, trying to create a democratic, cohesive, and united Afghanistan, something that has never been done over many centuries of Afghan's history.
And Biden there defending his decision to pull out the troops. And Arise editorial director Nick Jennings has been monitoring events, and he joins us for the latest. Nick, good to have you on Newsday. Now, following the withdrawal from Afghanistan, President Biden says he's redirecting American foreign policy away from military deployments and giving it a stronger focus on diplomacy and international cooperation. How is that going to work with the Taliban? And what do you see as the obvious obstacles?
Well, it's a very different change of focus for the United States under Biden. To quote an old phrase, jaw is better than war, or speak softly and carry a big stick is another way of saying it. It'd be interesting to see what assurances President Biden is going to give the president of Ukraine, who's in Washington today and meeting Biden later, and will want assurances over the security of Ukraine in the face of what it considers to be incursions from Russia into eastern Ukraine. Of course, the seizure of the Crimea Peninsula. But going back to America's relationship moving forward with the Taliban, we do know, as Biden said there, that they have some leverage over the Taliban. We don't know what that is, but we do know America is holding $9.4 billion of funds in its banks that, of course, the Taliban will want to get their hands on to help rebuild the infrastructure in Afghanistan. How does it move forward? I think we can only judge this on a day-by-day and a week-by-week basis. The Taliban governance of Afghanistan is still very much a work in progress in its very early days. They still don't have any clear indication of what kind of government they are going to put together. It's an administration still in a sort of vacuum, as it were, because we don't know that if they're going to introduce Sharia law, whether they're then going to sort of extend the olive branch to many of those people that oppose them who are in government. But going back to the next steps, it very much depends on whether the Taliban is able to live up to some of its alleged commitments. It's going to allow Western nations, including the United States, to send in airplanes to evacuate some of those remaining Americans and Brits and other Western nations' citizens who remain in Afghanistan. And of course, a very large number of Afghan citizens who've said that they would like to leave Afghanistan because they fear living under the Taliban. So I think it's very early days, but this was a very important announcement by Biden. He was very clearly on the defensive because of the amount of political criticism and repercussions following the messy departure of the American troops.
So where does this leave NATO and the rest of the allies like Britain, Do they now forge their own relationships with the Taliban?
Well, that's a very good question. I mean, Biden has pretty much said that America is no longer going to be the world's policeman. So, yes, by default, the United Kingdom and other European countries and members of NATO, although they are all joined by the same military alliance, will be looking to use their own diplomacy to get their own citizens out. And United Kingdom, for example, has sent a very senior figure, Sir Simon Gass, who's the new representative for Afghan transition, as they're calling it. He's been sent to Qatar to negotiate with the Taliban to get the remaining British citizens out and to get some kind of assurances from the Taliban about a peaceful transformation of power. And of course, the big question many of these countries will be wanting to find out is how safe Afghanistan is going to be amid all these speculations that it's going to be a haven for terrorism, and that many of those terrorist organizations, whether it's ISIS or the remnants of Al-Qaeda, will use Afghanistan as a base for launching terrorist attacks on European and American targets, as we've seen so much of in the last 20 years. So yes, there is a big responsibility now for individual countries to build their own relationship with the Taliban according to their own national interests. And again, this is something that we can only judge and gauge step by step, day by day, to see how things unfold in Afghanistan. And it is, of course, very early days.
Indeed. Nick, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has warned about the deepening humanitarian economic crisis in Afghanistan. How serious is that at this stage? Is it too soon to sound the alarm? Briefly.
I'm not sure it's too soon to sound the alarm, as he's done, because we are seeing that there's been a large movement of people out of parts of some of the surrounding, outside of Kabul, some of the regional capitals, heading towards the Pakistan border. Thousands of them reported to be gathering at one of the main crossing points. The Pakistani government are refusing them access and saying they don't want them in as long-term refugees. We're also seeing large numbers of people heading from the western city of Herat, trying to cross the border into Iran. So yes, there is a build-up of people trying to get out of the country, not using the Kabul airport because of that remains closed. But it is early days to see how big a sort of migration of people trying to get out of Afghanistan into those neighboring countries.
Thank you, Nick. We will continue to monitor this situation. Nick Jennings, Arise correspondent.